Welcome to the Mentors Moguls podcast. I'm your host, Heather Stone. I bring you mentors and moguls from all around the world, different walks of life, from creatives to CEOs to business leaders to top athletes and all kinds of other people in between. If you like our episode today, all of our podcasts are available on our YouTube channel. Please go ahead and subscribe and comment. We'd love to hear your feedback. Today, we're in New York. We're with Michele Romanello. She's a senior sales executive with Salesforce and also the co-founder of Soup Children's Theater. Welcome.
Thank you, Heather.
So we're talking a lot today about passion and how you found your passion and what did you do with your passion. You've got a phenomenal career to talk about, but let's take you way back when you first discovered that you had a passion for sales. And tell us a little bit about that. Did you train for it in the very beginning? Did you go to school for it? Did you have an inkling? When did you discover this?
It's really interesting to look back and sort of try to put it all together, because I find that so many people's careers were not always fully planned out. So you sort of fall into things. I was a double major in college, and that was business marketing and it was theater. So I kind of tried to balance the two. I loved the fact of being on stage and being able to relate that way. On the flip side, the whole idea of business was interesting. More on marketing, more on, that focus. There was never a sales focus. They taught you sales was one piece of whatever, and that was it. I did work while I was at college. I was able to start working for IBM way back then. IBM had something called a product center, which is a little retail store. So I started out there doing telesales, which was horrible. Hated telesales. But I ended up coming out on the floor and being able to work a little bit more with customers coming in. And just really baptism through fire and watching the people who are there full time. You start to pick up some of, what works and what doesn't.
Right.
When I graduated, I ended up getting a full-time job with IBM and moved into more of a branch selling to enterprise customers. So started going, and then they send you to the formalized training. 5 times you're in Dallas, 3 weeks at a time, with a bunch of other people that graduated from college as well. So it was kind of a continuation of college.
Right.
But at the same time, you really had to work. You learned to work as part of a team. How do you put together presentations, really about the products and what you have to sell and the value, and really the value of the brand. What does IBM bring to the mix? And then you do a lot of practice and presentations and all those good things. And then they kind of shoot you back into your branch office and you kind of hit the ground running.
So was it difficult? Was it scary? Because a lot of people think sales, oh my gosh, I'm putting myself out there for rejection. I'm putting myself out there for giving a demonstration. How did you feel at that time? Can you remember? Was there anxiety, or did you think I can't do this or I can do this?
Oh, there's always anxiety.
Right.
The one thing I learned myself, and you never trust yourself, and the one thing I know now is you just kind of got to go with it, because everybody feels the way you do.
Right.
You always feel like you're the least prepared person in the room. You have no idea what you're doing, and you show up and put a smile on your face and you're like, yay, let's do this. And that's really, that momentum is really what gets you there. The bottom line with sales is it's talking and meeting people and getting to know people.
Right.
And you're there for a reason. You're there because the people you're working with have a problem, and they have a problem you should be able to help them to sell. And if you've done your homework, being prepared takes away a lot of that anxiety. I tend to thrive where I have set accounts and I could build longer term relationships. And that has carried me throughout my whole career. Other people really thrive in that hunter mode, where they're dialing for dollars, as I call it, and they're finding new customers, and it's the thrill of that. So I'm more of that farmer, having a larger customer, but finding new ways, getting to really know their business, treating their business like it's my business, and then being able to negotiate and come to terms on something that will help them and help myself. And that's the best part of that partnership.
Okay. All right. So take us forward a little bit. So once you got your feet wet and you had what was that first sales presentation like? What was that first conversation like? Were you just a bundle of nerves, or were you ready?
So I'm selling to Grumman Aerospace, now who's Northrop Grumman. And that environment was all men, very few women in an engineering role back in the 80s, the later 80s.
Right.
And, but I have to say that it was probably one of the most supportive environments that I was in. And they truly watched out, both the customers, because they all knew each other for years. They were all, our folks were like coaching, little league teams. The customers were on. I mean, it was this real sense of family with the customer, which was wonderful, and a great way to learn. But when you do go out in that first call or those first series of calls, yes, your heart's pounding. You're terrified you're going to say the wrong thing.
Right.
You think everything that you say is supposed to have such importance.
Right.
It's a conversation, right? I mean,
Yes.
no one's really going to remember overall. But it truly, the more you do it, the better you get. And a lot of times it's just pushing through and just doing it. Because you just build it up so much in your head. It's just get in there and swim. Just jump into the 12 feet and start doggy paddling and you get there. You make mistakes and you do. But we had a great team and they'd watch out and you'd learn and people would do a little bit of coaching, say, hey, have you thought about this? Or, but for the most part, it really was just a tremendous way to really learn the business.
Right.
Yeah.
I think one thing that I see with sales, because that's my background, one thing that I see is everyone wants to get it perfect from the very beginning.
Yes.
And a lot of people will go one of two ways. Your audience, who you're pitching to, is they'll either say, you know what, she or he's out there and they're giving, I was young once, and they're giving it a shot and they're doing a great job. And I want to help them along. And so they kind of give you the gimmies a little bit. And then, other people are just having a bad day. And unfortunately, the new salesperson has to suffer through that. Do you remember, did you have any of those days?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about cranky men, that are probably 50, 60 years old, engineers.
They don't want to be
They
bothered.
don't want sales anyway.
No.
They want the engineer in front of them
Yeah.
to really talk about things.
Yeah.
So, but the one thing I've learned, because women in engineering and women in technology was not a big thing back then because
Yes.
there just weren't us. And there was no understanding of why that would be of value. But on the flip side, what was wonderful about it is I was more of I don't want to say novelty, I don't want to undermine it, but the point was I'm walking in a room and I'm somebody they haven't seen before. So they'd straighten up a little bit more, they'd be a little bit more on their guard, they'd, and a lot of them I think saw, I was 20, 21 years old. I was very much like their daughters were coming out on. And I think there was a lot of, hey, this is a very different conversation I had with anyone. And that's, by the way, why we want a very diverse sales team and bunch of people out there, right? The other thing you learn is there's all kinds of people. And yes, we know that. But the bottom line is you're not going to get along with everyone. My way of selling and working with people is very different from any of the other people on my team. And we had a very different balance of what our skill set was. For me, coming from a theater background, getting up and presenting was definitely something I did well. I enjoyed it. I'm up in front of people. I'm familiar with my piece and go and have at it. There are other people, I hated that. And they were so nervous about it and it just didn't work. And what you learn to do is really try to balance people's skill sets. On the same time, there are people in your customers that may be very cranky and you're never going to crack through, or you don't think you crack through, and then you find out. I remember I had this one customer out at their electronics division, and I think he was 55, 60 years old, and the senior sales exec brought me out and said, hey, I want to introduce you to your new sales rep. And I'm like, hi, 20 years old and love to find out more. And we had a meeting, we took him to lunch and came back. And then I started calling and I started following up and a few things came out and I went out to see them and I really tried to make myself very available to understand their business. What I found out after the fact, that when we came back after that first meeting, he picked up the phone and he called that senior sales exec and said, what the hell are you doing? You're bringing me out like a 21-year-old girl who, come on, you know me. This is a very technical thing. We've been doing this for a while. I want somebody who knows more, right? Who has more of a history. And within a week, he called back and he goes, don't you dare take her away. Oh. And we had the best relationship. He was lovely, took him out to conferences, and he was very open. It was a very different relationship than he had with any of his other vendors. And he told me so much more than he would share with anybody else. I like to personally connect, so I found out about his kids and about, his family life and what he does. All that just makes an enormous difference. And he truly was one of the people who I just regretted most when I finally moved from that job and changed roles for a little bit. I really missed him because it was a very unique relationship. But it just shows that I thought the part of it was, okay, I knew he was a little taken aback,
Right.
but I just kept going and just kept asking my questions, and it worked out. There are other times where you think you've just completely bombed. Completely, you walk out of there going, oh, I cannot believe I said that. They asked me, I didn't even know the answer to that question.
Right.
And I'm also someone who's like, look, I don't know the answer. I'm not going to try to, give an answer that I don't have.
Right.
And you just think you've just completely bombed it, and it's just another day. It really is. Or maybe you have somebody who doesn't want to work with you. And that's okay too, because that's why you have different personalities and different people.
Right.
So
So don't take it personal. When you get rejected, don't take it personal, because it's just the nature of the numbers of the job.
it truly is.
Right.
And you can never make everyone happy.
No.
That was the biggest lesson. I'm one of those people, I'm a people pleaser, right? So
right.
I just wanted everyone's acceptance all the time.
Right.
And that was my currency. And what you really learn after a while is that's an impossible task. Just like you can't be friends with everybody, and you don't want to be friends with everybody because
Right.
you're people you get along with better. Same thing, but it's a professional relationship, and that's your job, and that's the idea behind it.
That's great. So how did that job go? How long did that job last? I'm sure you grew tremendously through the first job. I mean, I think you just grow years within 6 months when it comes to a new field and something new. So
Yes.
where did that take you once you finished with that particular company?
Yeah, so had stayed with IBM for a while in sales, and then I did some marketing. I went to the headquarters part, but then I moved from there and I went to Cisco Systems, and I was there for quite a while, for about 17 years. And I I saw the rise of Cisco started as like 15,000 people, and when I left, it was probably at 70, 80,000. I mean, it was
Massive.
quite low. It was massive, and it was again another wonderful experience. Very different culturally than IBM was. And that's the thing to also realize. That's something when I speak to people, I say, when you're looking at companies and where to work, there's so many things, especially starting out, that first of all, they want you. That's always like, yay, you know what I mean? You want to say yes. They want to pay you X, whatever X is, and maybe that's a lot of money, and that's great.
Right.
The key thing, more than all of that, is you've got to really check out the culture of the company. I mean, unless you really are very driven on saying, I just want to be president of something by the time I'm X, right? You're spending a lot of your life in this company. And you really need to look for a cultural fit. Because there are a lot of companies that aren't. You can show up every day and be miserable because people don't treat each other well, and it's very competitive. And companies set it up so that you're on the same team supporting the same account, and you're competing against each other, and it's just and some people thrive in that environment,
right.
And somebody like me, that's absolutely the worst possible environment for me. So it's something to think about. Again, you learn later. I've got very lucky in my career that I really didn't find a real terrible fit, but it is something to really consider.
So something to really keep your eye on. So when you're going through your jobs and when you're interviewing, saying, okay, it's time to make a switch. I want to trade up or trade sideways for the purpose of upward mobility. You want to look at the culture. You want to make sure that you're happy as a person there, with the way they think and the way they treat the employees, and the employees interact with one another. But then you also want to go ahead and look at the environment you're putting yourself in when you're out customer facing.
Absolutely.
Okay.
That's right. And because everyone does have a different approach to their customers.
Right.
And as I said, some places it's just their churn and burn. They want to, there's always more people because it's a hot company.
Right.
People dying to get employed by them.
Right.
And you're there and you're working really hard, and sometimes it takes over your life. So the work-life balance gets out of whack.
Right.
Sometimes it's your expectations of what you have to do and the hoops you have to jump through are just to you make those decisions. Is it worth it? Is it not worth it? And it's okay to make a decision saying it's not worth it.
Right.
But the key thing, my parents always said, you never leave a job without another job. So if that is the situation you're in and it becomes unbearable, do your homework. I have kids who, in college and graduated, and, everyone thinks I toured a college for 3 hours and I fell in love with it, but they've never lived away from home. And, this is a whole new experience.
Right.
They go to school there and they find out, I don't love it after all. And they need to transfer. And when you look to transfer, you know a lot more about what you've done and what you like and what you don't like and what didn't work for you about a college. So when you visit another one, your eyes are much more open and you're looking for different things.
Right.
It's the same thing with a job. Right? So you go through those early jobs and you get it, and maybe it's not right, and maybe you just come home every day just going, oh my God, I hate it. Every day I hate it. Do your homework. look, see what other kind, because you can stay in the same industry
Right.
and just find a very different culture. And that may open up all new doors.
Really good point. That's a really good point. So you were there for 17 years.
17 years.
So you obviously liked it. You were
did.
obviously thriving and
did.
conquering and succeeding. So what point did you say, okay, it's time to jump to the next lily pad and continue my growth?
And for me, it takes a while. So I am definitely not of today where people move very quickly. So I was there for 17 years, a long time. And
They both get you somewhere great.
And they do. And that's just it. And for me, it's kind of like the depth of what I learned there. So I actually, on top of being there for such a long time, I was on the same customer for all that time, which people go, are you crazy? But again, I sold to AT&T. Very large corporation.
Sure.
They were a very good Cisco customer. And we had a very large team. And I did different things throughout that time. So every time I changed what I sold, I changed who I sold to and the solutions and how I looked at their business. They have a very broad business.
Right.
So that kept it interesting. It's not like I just woke up and did the same thing for 17 years.
Sure.
But again, a great team, a wonderful environment, worked with a wonderful set of folks. I felt challenged. I felt like there's always a new experience that I can expose myself to, or a different way of looking at things. But I did. Towards the end, I ended up working on this one project for several years, and it was probably the largest deal of my career. What was wonderful about it was a new technology that we were coming to market with. We partnered early with AT&T, got in, calling high, got the executives to sponsor this and say yes. We listened to them. Where everyone else was selling the technology, what we heard was, at that time, it wasn't the technology, it was the business model that we had to put together commercials. And when you really listen to your customer and you understand what their pain points are, you kind of can shift and put something new together. And that's what we did. So we pulled together a team, built a new commercial model for Cisco for this specific deal. It was a large enough deal to justify that.
Right.
Pulled in our CFO for our division. He's never negotiated with customers, and I pulled him into customer meetings because he needed to hear their pain points in order to get creative and figure out how we do this. Operation. We had people in on this that nobody brought in before, but pulling together a team. One of the things I always say is, look, you are never the smartest person in the room. Let me put it this way. I know I'm never the smartest person in the room. There's always somebody smarter technically, smarter on their business, whatever it might be. My role in sales, and this is the part I really love, is I'm the resource finder. So I need to understand what we're trying to do here, what your pain points are, and now let me assemble a team of the smartest one financially, technically, a partner, or this or that, and you pull it all together. The customer truly appreciates the perspectives that you bring and the resources. They feel very important. They know you're listening to them. That's huge. And you're able to really build that long-term relationship. So we're able to close that deal and then execute upon it. So that was kind of the pinnacle. And then we implemented, and then we tried to work and grow on a joint go-to-market to help them sell their service. But after a couple of years, it was just time for a change. I needed a change from the customer, change from a lot of different things. And I just started looking outside just to say, I think I've been here too long. I got to shake myself up a little bit. I've gotten too comfortable. And that's when the Salesforce opportunity came to me. I submitted for it going, I have no idea what this is going to mean. I used Salesforce in my job, and I was the biggest critic of it just because the way I sold it didn't support the way the implementation was. But here I am,
ironic.
getting that job at Salesforce to sell it. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what did I do?
Sure.
But and then I went to work, and I went to work, and most of the people on my team were my kids' age, right, or older.
Sure.
I mean, probably late 20s, early 30s, and they were probably in their second job or possibly third job, but probably second job after graduating from college. And here I was with 25 years of technology experience and sold very differently. So that was fascinating, right? Because you come in and you're looking at different things, and it was a great opportunity both to work with people and mentor them, and kind of how I sold and how I approached it. And for me to really see things again through those eyes, because you realize how far I was from my 20s, and that whole sense of newness and excitement of the new job. I mean, I was excited, but I'd also been doing this for a while.
Sure.
So you're able to share a lot. And I think it kind of, I learned a lot from them, and I think they learned a lot from me. So it's been great.
So Salesforce as an organization is very interesting. They've been in the press lately, not for a bad reason, but for a really good reason. And it has to do with women and the support of women. And can you tell me a little bit and tell our viewers a little bit about Salesforce and their approach?
Yeah, absolutely. Mark Benioff, who's our CEO, is absolutely at the forefront of an awful lot of different issues. I mean, he looks at it saying, it's not just, we're not worried just about our shareholders, we're worried about our stakeholders. And our stakeholders is not just our shareholders, but it's our employees and it's the communities that we live in.
Right.
And he's very focused on trying to do good, to do, a lot of great things. And we have a lot of different, culturally, again, going back to that culture, it's a wonderful place to work, especially if you like to give back and if you really like to do a lot. One of the most recent, it's been several years now, is the focus on women's equality.
Right.
We had two of our executives chatting over sitting in a bar, just kind of talking, and they said, you know what, we really don't believe that women are seen or are paid as equally in Salesforce as they should be. And they had access to Mark, and they walked in, they brought him that. He was like, you are crazy. He said, because this whole company is brought up on equality. It's one of our core tenets. We have 3 or 4, and that's one of them. And they said, look, he said, well, if you really believe this, let's do an audit. And they said, okay, if we do this audit, if it turns out that this is true, we cannot sweep this under a rug. He goes, no, we're going to make it right. So they did an audit. It took 3 to 6 months. They looked at not just how we're hiring in people, but then once you're in and you have an option for a promotion, who's kind of promoted, and where's that man and that woman 2 years in, right? And how are they being paid then? And then looking further. And when they did this, they realized there was a $3 million pay gap between men and women. And there were a few men, too, that they had to adjust their salaries.
Right.
They did it again in another 2 years, and it was another $3 million pay gap. Now, that has we've been acquiring, and we've been growing like crazy, and we've acquiring a lot of companies, and you're acquiring their cultures and how all that as well. But the bottom line is, it really was hitting a nerve, and I think it's a nerve throughout technology. It's something that I've been involved in women in technology companies since I've started. And Cisco had a very strong women in technology group that we used to join, and we'd have speakers and we'd speak to this. We'd look at percentage of female engineers and female engineering managers, female sales. You look at all these, slicing and dicing the metrics, and there's an issue. And it wasn't just at Cisco, it was at Salesforce, it was all throughout tech.
Sure.
So I've been probably on these things. And by the way, Salesforce also has all of these, employee groups as well. And in these 15 years that I've been very actively engaged in a lot of those, the numbers haven't budged. So we've shown a big light on it. How does it change? So, for example, Mark Benioff, in the ways he does it, not only in how we pay you, but also he said, I will not sit in a meeting that does not have at least 30% women.
Really?
Yeah. Okay. So every meeting he walks in, if there are less than 30% of the attendees that are women, he will walk out of that meeting. So it was interesting because we had a local. She was an AVP in sales in our group, and she was in the middle of the summer, like dead heat of the summer. She was tapped on to sit in this Mark Benioff meeting. He was coming into town and something. She's like, why me? I mean, there are how many layers above her in sales to get to? And the problem was they were not at that 30% piece. And she went to her mentor, and her mentor said, you get in there, you sit at that table, and you participate. Because, yes, you feel silly that this is the reason you're in there. You wouldn't have been in there. But you know what? We have a problem. Not saying if we have to go down to your level, but if you're the person in the room, then you need to prove the fact by being there that you deserve to be there.
Right.
And that's the piece. So you put a big focus on women and equal pay and equal opportunity. Women have to also continue to step up and continue to push. So it's a responsibility, I guess, is really what I'm saying on the other end.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's very interesting, but just even bringing people in, I mean, there's a good way and a bad way. You say, well, we're just filling seats with women, but at the same time, it sends a message saying that this is going to be status quo, so start making the changes. So I applaud them for that. I really do. Obviously, I'm all about there needs to be more women in the boardroom at the table, but you have to be qualified to be there. Whatever, I don't care if you're a gecko. If you're qualified, you're qualified. So, just as long as they're qualified to be there, I think that that's really the push is let's get them educated and let's give them a seat at the table if they've earned it. Anyone that has earned it. So I think that's really important.
What was interesting, I just saw a documentary on women in film. And it was women producers, and it was both on television shows as well as. And this one woman was talking about how hard, and she just was fighting for her spot, and finally got a door opened, and finally was able to direct or to produce and to move on. And then she became the person hiring, and she said, "So I got all of these shorts sent into me from all this work from all the people," and she said the women candidates came in, and their work was not as good as the men. So she goes, what do I do now, right? Do I pick the best work, which would be the man, or do I bring a woman in? And she said, I pulled in one of the women to interview her, and they spoke about it, and she said, well, all I had was one camera and, whatever it was. And she said, you shot that with only... So the lesson she learned was it wasn't that the woman was less talented. She had less access to resources to put her best work forward. And I think a lot of that is true even in technology sales, because I look at all these women all looking for what is the next, and Salesforce is very open. Any job that's open is out there.
Right.
But when people reach out, they reach out for the people they know the best.
Sure.
And there's a lot of men, and men hang and hire men, and that's typically who comes in. And sometimes we don't even know that there's an opportunity. Or sometimes a woman is not put in a leadership position, even not a promotion, but just to kind of run this task force or do this, or given those opportunities where they're known in their group, but how do you expand their knowledge and what they can do when you're in a sales role and you're running after your quota and your customers and doing all that? And those kinds of opportunities are typically, I know Joe, so he's going to come in. That's what has to change. And sometimes you're right, it may not be the person with the most experience. But again, I look at saying women make up more than 50% of the people graduating with college degrees, and we still don't even have that percentage in middle management, much less upper management. So haven't figured out what it is, but it needs to be solved.
One of the things that I love to ask women in all kinds of different careers is, how does your women's intuition, do you feel like you have women's intuition or your gut instinct? Does that play a role in sales?
Oh, I think so. I think, it's interesting. Sales has become much more of a science than when we started. When we started, it was like, sure, go out and sell and do this, and here's a presentation. And now there are playbooks. I mean, I just see all the resources Salesforce puts behind what we have to sell, and it's, and just, defining in value and just really trying to understand it so that you just really execute. And that's great, because when you're managing sales organizations, you want to take chance out of it, right? But the bottom line is it's still a human connection. And I think really building that, you do have to tap into your intuition. And I think women have a very different approach to relationships and building those. And we see things that men don't always see. I mean, I just even take my husband, he'll come at things differently. He'll be like, wow. Like that would never have been my reaction in a million years. And I think the same thing in a sales call. If you go on a sales call with somebody else, bring your VP out to meet the customer. And obviously you plan for those meetings, and you know what you're going to discuss. But when you get out there, what's being heard and what's being said, and sometimes you just something's being missed. You want to ask that extra question or two. You want to get to a different place. You may want to transition or leverage relationships and have an intuition. So who is the right person? And really try to get at those things. A lot of times you got to trust your gut. You really do.
And so it serves you well to trust your gut.
It definitely does. Well, you have to be who you are.
Right.
You have to be authentic in everything you do. You bring your whole self. And we say that at Salesforce, and I think it's really true. It's where you'll best be happy, and it's truly what differentiates you. We talk about culture and how that differentiates a company. You have 3 insurance companies. Why would you want to go to one over another if they pay the same and it's the same job? The culture is what separates it. Why did they pick you over 3 other people? It's because of what you bring to it and who you are authentically, because that resonates with them and it resonates with the customers.
Right. So Would you tell someone maybe just getting out of college or someone that's thinking of getting into sales, would you advise them, is there a way they can be an intern for a summer just to kind of learn, let me dip my toe in this water and see if sales is my thing? Because there's so many people out there that would like to take it for a test drive. They're not really sure. They've never really sold. I don't know if I'll like it, but
right.
Would you recommend someone try something like that?
Absolutely. Well, I just say that nowadays, I mean, I just look at, even in college, there's so many opportunities for kids to do internships. And I think that's the best thing you could do. And you should try a range of jobs. So if you're a business major, go for marketing, go for sales, and do all that, because how do you know what you really like? You're studying theory, you're talking about things, you're modeling things, you're bringing your experience, but you're not doing it. And the doing is really critical for you to find out, I like this, but I hated that. So now I want to find a job to make sure I don't do that.
Right.
And that is really important. And I think the same with sales. I think also what you find is when you join a company, whether it's a little startup or it's a very large company, you're joining typically out of college as an entry-level position.
Sure.
Very few entry-level positions are truly fulfilling and a lot of fun. And probably you could do a lot more than what that entry-level position is. But they're training you. They're giving you a good set of skills. You're learning. Even if you're frustrated with that job, try to sit back and figure out, what is it that I like? Try sales. You may find, I love talking to people, but oh my gosh, having a monthly, weekly, quarterly quota drives me crazy. Having that kind of pressure, I can't do that every day.
Yes.
Totally get that. That's very fair. But you know what? If you love dealing with customers, maybe you want to work, there's, industry groups within, or marketing where where you come out and you present to customers and you speak to customers, but you're not out there managing a quota and handling all the rest of that back end stuff. That can be very frustrating.
Right. Right. Where would you go as a resource if you didn't have a mentorship and you didn't have an internship? Where would you suggest someone go for learning a little bit about it? For instance, if someone were to send you an email or to find someone who sold something in their area, in an industry that they're interested in, would you encourage that person to take them out to lunch or send them an email or try and have a conversation just like you and I are to find out, what's it really like behind the curtain? What's it like past the glossy interview? What's life really like as a salesperson? Would that be a good way for someone to kind of take a closer look to see if they're not really undecided of what they want to do?
I think it's a great way.
Okay.
Always reach out to people. In fact, I was saying that to my daughter, and she's in college now, and she's looking for internships and thinking, and she's a business major, and but she loves fashion and she loves that. And so I'm like, well, let's think about how many people that we know as a family who are in the fashion industry.
Sure.
And you make connections because you know a lot more people than you think.
Right.
And I will tell you, most people would be very happy to sit down and spend some time with you. Have lunch, grab coffee, sit down. One of the things we do at Salesforce, which is great, is you have the entry-level jobs, and they're in it about a year. And then it's a business development rep. So they're speaking to lots of customers. They're calling, they're trying to find people interested to set up that next meeting with the sales rep. Right. And they're listening in to learn. I mean, it's listening and learning by doing. And then they have options to say, do you want to go sales? Do you want to go technology? They have different job options. And I've worked with a few of them where I'm like, come on a few calls. Come, let's listen to how this works, right? And even if it's later in the process that you're not used to, and they may find something, I really don't like that. Well, then think about, what about technology? And as be a technical role, and do the same thing with the SEs. Right. Ask. People are so happy to reach out. So that's the best way, I think.
Right. In this day and age, social media is the way of life. Everything is on social media. So that's nothing new to the sales world. Are there any do's or any don'ts when it comes to sales? Have you seen anything that's really worked well where they've incorporated social media? And this is really as a person selling one-on-one, not as the company. Or any major don'ts, like, absolutely, let me just save you some pain, don't do this. Have you seen any plus or minus?
Yeah. Okay. It's interesting because there was no social media when we started, right? I mean, that was just what it was, right?
Fax machines.
That's not even, or
fax
just
machines.
starting. Oh my
wow.
gosh. Yes. A long time ago.
Yeah.
But nowadays, it is a fact of life, right? We all live on our phones. It's just what we do personally. Yeah. And it's interesting. Companies are changing because they realize that the people they're looking to hire, this is your world, right? Yes. And social media is your world. So how do you come to, quote, an old cultured company without those tools? That's how you know how to breathe and how do you work. Sure. So companies are really incorporating social media tools to change their culture a little bit. But on the flip side, you cannot treat social media at work the same way you do at home. And it kind of, even applying to college, right? You hear all those horror stories about colleges Googling and finding, the people that they're accepting. Facebook pages, Instagram account, all these things where they're like, and they rescind offers based on what's out there. Yes. Your virtual footprint lives forever. I mean, we can't say that enough, right?
Don't post your friend's bachelorette party everywhere if you're looking for a job.
Please
don't do it.
That's exactly right. But I will tell you, I live on LinkedIn because every customer I meet, 80 to 90% of them are on there. Yeah. So we never had those opportunities. If I'm looking for somebody to talk to, I can Google like vice president of sales at this company, and I could come up with all these hits. Right. And those are people I can start to reach out to. So it's a wonderful tool. You just have to treat it respectfully and understand that this is the professional you. You can still have the rest of your stuff within limits, but you just, it can be the best tool and it could also really work against you. You have to be really careful.
Right. What are some of the highs and lows of your career? And again, we're talking about this to maybe enlighten and help encourage and also to teach others that are thinking of getting to the sales role, or they're in another role, but they're still fascinated by your path and they want to learn from your experience. So can you share with us some of the highs and lows? I'd like to hear how people overcome adversity, because your career in life is not all smooth and it's not all an upward trajectory. Right. You're going to have bumps and how you react to the bumps. So share with us some of your highs and lows.
Sure. What I always say is you learn the most when people say no to you, right? And when you stumble and come across something. It could be when we were talking about, those painful parts when you start out. Well, guess what? When you're in sales, you are never too old to have those embarrassing moments or where things don't go well or whatever that might be. And then there's those highs where you close that deal or you overcome, you're really able to make something happen, even if it isn't the largest deal, but you were able to overcome, a competitive issue, no funding, and you were able to solve a problem that has transformed that company and really put them on the right path. Those are the wins that you take with you and you just thrill at, right? That's just wonderful. And then there are times you lose and in sales is really emotional. I mean, we try to pull the emotion out, but when you lose a deal,
you lose a deal.
Oh my gosh, you lose a deal. Yeah. And I always say, well, the work you is different from the personal. Well, no. When you lose, you lose. It's like, whether you were that final, baseball and you struck out and you lost the game. I mean, that's how you feel. The company's very aware. Everyone knows you've been committing this deal. You've been forecasting it. You've been doing all these things and you come back. And even if it's all for the right reasons, you didn't win it. Right. And that's sales. I hate to say it. And by the way, there is no sales rep that is never lost and that doesn't lose, right? So like you keep telling yourself these things to make you feel better, but you carry them with you. Right. But you also learn. The key thing for me is you plan before a meeting, you plan before those sales calls, you execute, and then you take that team or whoever's been working with you and you do the post dump, right? And just say what went really well, what worked, what did we not see, what completely blindsided us, what could we have controlled better and done better. And the more you do that, the more you and the team you pull together can admit, you know what, I should have prepared a little bit more. I should have thought about that. Maybe I should have brought that extra customer story, talk about success, whatever it might be. But you learn, and the next time, hopefully you go at it and you're better. So the highs and lows you have to learn from. And then I think there's also, so there's stumbles in your career, and then there's also stumbles in your life, right? Because, we talk about career like it is the be all and end all, but we keep talking, there's work-life balance. You want to maybe have a family one day, you have friends, you just can't work all the time.
No.
And there are other things that come into play, right? And it could be personal issues, about yourself. I mean, I went through that because from a health issue. 9 years ago, again, you think here I am in my, early 40s, and I was diagnosed with breast cancer, not in my family. And I have 3 young kids, right? Wow. My youngest was in 2nd grade.
Wow.
I am working full-time plus. I was probably putting in, I can't even tell you how many hours at work, volunteering at my kids' school, volunteering at our local library, doing all these things. And it's like, what do you mean I have breast cancer? This is just not at all what you, you certainly don't plan for it.
No.
But you have to deal with it, and you have to work with it. And everyone reacts differently to anything like that.
Sure.
So, for me, so I ended up, and I'm blessed, I live right in the outskirts of Manhattan. I have Memorial Sloan Kettering in my backyard, and that's where I went. And they have process, right? And you have to trust your doctors, you do all your research, and then you for me, then I have to go with it, and you make those decisions. And, they're big decisions, my husband, my family, all involved in it. Went through chemo, lost all my hair, and it's what you do, right? You gotta get up every day. I'd have chemo. And I was also really blessed in that I had a job where I worked from home. Unless I had meetings, I mean, I could go into the office and I'd go meet with customers, but I could also work from home a lot of the time,
which is great.
Which was fabulous.
Yes.
So, so for me, in those days, you get up and you go. And, I remember I had my surgery, I had a double mastectomy, I took off, and you're sort of like, I never not work. So I'm like, what do I do, right? I'm not feeling terrible or in terrible pain. So within 4 or 5 days, people were visiting, and it was all that kind of thing. And then I had my first few days, and I'm like, what do I do? So I called into a conference call, and my SVP was like, is that you? Like, what, because I was very open with work.
Sure.
Had a wonderful manager at the time who was very open, say, this is what's going for me. And this was at Cisco. The company, rose behind me, and I'm telling you, it was like, and, to the point that like I'd be working with home without a wig. I was very comfortable,
right?
And video became a big thing. So all of a sudden there's video. I'm like, okay, like, because people don't need to necessarily, it's not what they expect, but you just, wake up one more day, you get on the next call, you do the next thing. And honestly, for me, and everybody's different,
right?
It's distracting. It helped me compartmentalize. So I'm dealing with all the right things about the cancer, go through that, go through chemo, go through everything, and you just get up, you walk the dog in the morning, you get your kids to school, you get back on and you go back to work. If you're feeling tired, you stop, you take a nap, you do what you need to do to take care of you.
Right.
But for me, I had to keep moving forward.
Sure.
So,
okay. That's a whole nother U-turn. Or it's a big speed bump, right?
Sure it is.
I talk about barriers and how do you overcome barriers. A speed bump in you're sitting with the doctor and he tells you face to face, hopefully not over the phone, this is your diagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
So you must have felt in shock, devastated, and then maybe feeling very alone, and then feeling, oh my gosh, what's next? Or I don't even know what to do next. So you're presented with that. You've got a great company that's standing behind you. Once you got through it, I would imagine, and you tell me what the real case was, that your priorities might have shifted once you went through that experience, and you're blessed to come out the other side.
Right.
Happy and whole.
Thank God. Right.
Did you change anything? And this leads me to my question of what would you tell your 27-year-old self? If you knew all of this was coming forward, what would you tell your 27-year-old self?
It's a great question. Because when you go through it, your life has radically changed.
Sure.
It really has. You look at everything, you're thankful for every moment you're breathing air, right? And then another day goes by and it's another sales call, and then you got to do research on this, and my kids, something's going on at school, and whatever happens. And all of a sudden you realize you've kind of drifted back into those 10, 12-hour days plus and all the rest of that. and you're kind of like, I'm not really smelling the violets anymore, right? You know, I mean, I'm just kind of here. It is a battle. And I always say, for each one of, the more you learn about yourself and you're thrown things, whether it's work or personal or anything like that, you take it to learn about yourself. Right. So what I realized is I found the devil, and the devil is me. Because for me, I'm the one who's like, I'm still sucked into putting my blinders on and just doing what's in front of me, versus always stepping back and saying, should I be doing this? Yes. Do I need to do this for this amount, or can I dial it back and still do it and be able to, you know, be present in other parts of my life?
Right.
And that's the balance that I struggle with. And I think a lot of people do.
Sure.
You know, the squeaky wheel gets the grease, and that's where you focus. I think what you have to do on a regular basis, and this is what I would tell my 27-year-old self, is even if you have to plan it, take it once a month, once a quarter, a couple times a year, to just stop and just pull back and take, even if it's an hour, and just sit and just try to kind of pull it together as, where am I now? Where do I want to be? What are my goals? What am I trying to do? And you have to come back to your personal truth. You have to check in with your body. Am I really happy doing what I'm doing? Is this really what I should be doing? If not, what do I change?
Right.
And I think doing things like, you know, I walk/run 5-6 days a week, you know, meditation, not as good about it as I should, but those kinds of things, I think, help you press the pause button a little bit, because that's what life is about. All of a sudden you wake up and you're like, how did I get to here?
Sure.
Right? You really have to fight for those moments where you just revisit who you are.
Sure.
So I happen to know that you have a second passion. Not only are you phenomenal at sales, but you also have a second passion. So can you share with the audience what that second passion is and how you're following that as well?
So my husband had formed a theater company, Seat of Our Pants Theater, or Soup as we're known, back in like the late 80s, and done some producing down here in the city. Had put it on hold for a while because he's the one who stayed home with our kids. Right. And then really, I guess, early 2000s, or, you know, it's been about 10 years now up in our local town of Pelham. You know, people kept saying, it's a big theater town, so where can I take my kids? And he thought, you know, let's just bring this here. So we brought back the company and started producing children's theater. So we run, you know, piano and voice lessons. We have workshops for K through 2, 3 through 8. We do main stage productions with these kids. And really the wonderful piece of it for me, I mean, I'm administrative throughout, and then the final tech week, I'm there.
Right.
And through all the, you know, I'm selling tickets, I'm backstage helping with costumes or sets or whatever's needed, I kind of jump in. What's wonderful is you've got these kids that we start with, you know, they're third graders, they're terrified when they first audition. And you see the confidence they get, and you just watch them grow.
Right.
I mean, there's nothing like theater and we keep saying to parents, look, your kids don't have to go and do this for a living. That's not why we're here. But the confidence your kids, I mean, you name a job where you don't have to get up in front of people or a meeting or whatever and be able to speak to something.
Right.
Everyone has to do that.
Right.
And if you can get confidence, if you can get on a stage as part of a community in a play and dance and sing and you know, do whatever, you could do anything.
Right.
And that's what you see these kids, you watch them through awkward phases, et cetera, until all of a sudden they walk in after a summer and they audition, you know, in 8th grade for Mary Poppins, and you're like, what happened to you? Now you're Mary Poppins, right? And you were a little, you know, bird girl in Seussical, you know, 3 years ago. It's wonderful to watch that, and to have some piece of shaping that is truly very rewarding.
I'm sure your face kind of lights up when you talk about it. So I love to hear about that. But like you said, for anything that's customer facing, if you get into theater, it's just another form of theater in a way.
That's exactly right. So I always say you're playing a role no matter how you look at it.
Sure.
And it helps, and with sales, it does help, going back to you're terrified, and it becomes, when you're terrified and you're young, it all becomes about you. You put all the pressure on you.
Yes.
The whole idea with theater is you're thinking about something, it's bigger than you, right? You're one cog in this whole thing. Even if you're the lead, you're one piece. It's not happening just with you.
Right.
And it's the same thing in sales. So if you approach it more that this is a role that I'm taking,
Right.
I think it offloads some of that terror that can take over. And keep thinking about putting it over onto that customer, the person, and really finding out about them and putting the focus on them and not you, it's going to be so much easier. It really will be.
You're giving back. You're giving life lessons. They don't realize it, but you're giving very, very important life lessons to people. So,
yeah,
and
it's just wonderful to watch. I mean, as I say, it's to be able to have an effect on somebody and change something is truly, it's a gift.
And the town.
And the town itself. That's right. Yeah.
Good for you.
Yeah, it's fun.
Good for you.
Thank you.
I love that.
Yeah.
Well, what is some piece of advice that you received from someone along the way, since we're talking about mentorship and women chiming in, whether it was a woman or a man, anyone, your mother, your father, whoever it was, is there one piece of advice that you thought, wow, I've really clung to that piece of advice, that has really gotten me through some of the toughest times? Is there anything that you've ever had in your life that you remember that was just the best thing that you've ever heard, or something that's kind of your mantra as you go through life?
Probably, this too will end. It sounds terrible, but if you're in the heart of like
a bad sales
RP
job,
hell, or you're facing this really big meeting, or whatever it might be, that all the pressure is on, and you feel very much out of your depth for whatever reason.
Right.
This too will end. You're going to wake up every day and thank God, and you're going to pull yourself together and you're going to put yourself out there because you have to. Even there are times you want to hide in your bed, you can't.
Yeah.
So you put a smile on and leverage your resources, right? Yeah. Talk to people, because that's a great way to not feel alone. It really is, because you think it's just you. Oh my gosh, nobody could feel as horrible as I feel. And the more you talk to people, because you find out, you know what? I'm really not. This person who seems so self-assured and know what they're doing is going through the same exact thing inside. And even if they look wonderful and all of that, it's exactly the same. So it's not always about you. If you put the focus on somebody else, it makes it easier. You don't have to have all the answers. You really don't.
I love it. Well, you are a great mentor. You will make a great mentor. And thank you for sharing all of your advice and your stories with us today.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for tuning into the Mentors and Moguls podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, rate and review this interview and share it with a friend who could benefit from today's guest. You can find bonus video episodes at mentorsandmogulspodcast.com or check out our events page and our blog at heatherrstone.com. Until next time, make it a great day.